Hello, this is MusicTechHelpGuy, and welcome to this video tutorial on using the Drum Leveler plugin from SoundRadix. The Drum Leveler plugin is essentially a smart compressor gate plugin which shows you a real-time display of anything you put through it. It's really, really useful for hiding or reducing or completely gating the bleed in certain drum tracks, like things like your kick drum, your snare drum, and your toms, the close mics on the kit that you want to be able to hide some of the bleed from, say, your cymbal crashes, the hi-hat, ride cymbal, and whatnot. So you wouldn't use this on things like your overhead track, your room track. You're going to use this exclusively on the close mics on your kit. So before we start using the Drum Leveler plugin, let's take a look at what we have here. I've got a set of live drums. I've got 3 mics on the kick drum. You have a kick in, a kick out, and a Yamaha sub kick. It's top and bottom snare drum, hi-hat, 3 tom mics for the 3 toms, a pair of overhead mics, a pair of room mics, and also a single mono room mic that we tucked away in a corner, just sort of like an added effect. In this session, well, right now I'm working in Logic, obviously, but Drum Leveler works pretty much for any DAW because they have it available in pretty much every single format, including VST, RTAS, AU, AAX. So all your main plugin formats, it's available. So chances are it'll work for your DAW as well. So let's take a listen to what we've got here. I haven't really done anything to this other than adjust volume and pan. I did add a compressor and EQ to the overhead track just to sort of fatten it up a little bit and brighten it up a little bit. And I also added the direction mixer to the room mics just to spread them out a little bit. But other than that, these all the sounds you're hearing are pretty much raw from the mics. So that doesn't really sound bad at all. It sounds good. It's just, this is a rock song. And when we throw the guitars in here and the bass and the vocals, we really want the kick and the snare and the toms to really punch through the mix. So that's what I'm going to use Drum Leveler for in this song, is I'm going to use it to basically take out the bleed on the kick in mic and really make the kick mic pop out a lot. And I'm also going to use it to sort of parallel compress the top snare track, and I'm also going to use it to sort of bring the tom hits out a little louder when they are used. So let's start with the kick in. Kick in by itself just sounds like this. We're really, really hearing a lot of the snare drum and the cymbals in there, more so than you usually would on a kick in. I'm not really sure what happened here for that to happen, but we'll try to fix it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of EQ. I like the EQ to come before Drum Leveler, same as I normally like EQ to come before compression, but there's different theories about that. I'm just going to brighten up the high end a little bit, just to make it pop a little bit. Maybe pull up the mid-high range, pull up the low end just a touch. And I'm also going to high pass it as well. So let's see what that sounds like. So it's got a little bit more snap than it did before, but we still have all that bleed and cymbal crashes in there. So we need to take all that out. So next I'm going to add my Drum Leveler plugin. And just by itself, just without touching anything, let's see what this looks like. So you can see that Drum Leveler is giving us like a real-time display of all of the transients in that track. So let me just explain. I'm not going to do a full tutorial on it, but I'm going to give you the basics of how to use it, because there's really only about 4 knobs on it that I ever really touched. So there's 2 sliders here. There's a target level and a low threshold. The target level is what maximum volume do you want your full level of compression to be? Because what we're going to do is we're going to take each kick hit and we're going to maximize its volume up to a higher level so it has more punch to it. Likewise, we're going to sort of gate things down. So things that are not loud enough to be a kick drum are actually going to be tucked away a little bit lower in the mix or completely gotten rid of. So that's where the low threshold comes into play. Anything lower than the low threshold is not going to be compressed, but can also be gated out using the gate knob over here. So what I'm going to do just for now is I'm going to pull the target level almost all the way up, just under clipping, negative 0.4 dB. And I'm going to listen to this, and I'm going to find a low threshold where it seems to catch all of the kick drums, but nothing else. You'll also notice that some of the transients are in different colors. The transients that are in blue are ones that are not being compressed at all. Ones that are in orange are ones that are being compressed. And everything in gray is basically being unaffected. So I'm just going to hit play here, and I'm going to try to just catch the kick drums. So it seems like we're just getting the kicks in there. We're still hearing the other things, but really only the kick drums are going higher than this low threshold line. Now what we can do is we can pull up the amount of compression, and only the kick drums will be compressed. Only the things that are above the low threshold line will be compressed. Things below it will not. You can actually go the opposite direction too, and you can sort of like crush it and actually do like backward compression. You can sort of like pull things down and make things sound more squashed if you're looking for like that sort of squash drum loop sort of sound. I'm going to start at 0. It actually starts you at 50% compression. I'm going to start us at 0 and roll it up just so you can hear how this affects it. So we're still getting a little bit of the hi-hat and the snare drum in the background. What we can do is we can play with the gate range, and that's going to pull everything below the low threshold down. Now, I realize it sounds a little choppy now because we're going to be blending the kick track with the overhead track and our other 2 kick tracks, which are basically going to remain untouched. We can sort of blend this almost like a sample underneath the other track. So we don't have to worry too much about the choppiness, at least on this instrument. Now, if we want to get less of the snare drum, because there's a couple spots where the snare drum, like right here, comes immediately after the kick drum, we can play with the hold and recovery times. These are sort of like your release time in a compressor. It's really what they are. If you pull them down, you're only going to get a little like sliver of the waveform in there. Let me go back to the beginning here. It's like the hold time is sort of like your attack time in a compressor. You know, how it's how long, how much of the attack is let through on the initial compression. So higher hold settings are going to sound more natural. Lower ones are going to sound more choppy sounding. And then the recovery time's a lot like the release time. Do we want this tail on each one of these transients to be sort of long, or do we want it to be short? Obviously, we're dealing with these little snare drums that are coming immediately after the kick drum. So we want to set a recovery time that lets us get rid of most of those snare drums. All right, cool. Let's see what this sounds like with everything in the mix. Oops, and we'll try it without. And then one time more with. And if you don't want it to be that drastic, you can roll down your compression amount a bit and roll up your gate range so you're not gating the signal so much, and you're also not compressing it so evenly. It may actually give it a little bit more of a natural effect, and that's what I'm going to go for. Yeah, that actually sounds better to me. All right, so let's go to the snare drum. Now, the snare drum, normally gating the snare drum is a bad idea. Just gating the snare drum is a bad idea. What I like to do is I like to sort of parallel compress and parallel gate the snare drum. You could do this by busing the snare drum out to like an aux track, compressing one signal, not compressing the other. I just like doing it the simple way and duplicating the track, duplicating the clip down, and on one use drum leveler, on the other don't use drum leveler. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'll call one snare top DL, and the other one will just be snare top. So in snare top DL, let's throw a drum leveler on there. And on this one, we're going to completely get rid of anything in the background, any bleed. We just want to hear the snare drums. And we want it to be really, really punchy. But in the end, we're going to blend that with the original snare, and it will get sort of like the best of both worlds. Let me go back to that fill there just to see how that turned out. Yeah, there's a lot of these like little notes in there that are almost like little ghost notes that are falling below the threshold range. That's fine. Let's find this other little fill here. All right, I'm also going to EQ this a little bit differently. It's kind of bangy sounding. Not really I'm more of a fan of low-tuned snare drums, but this one somehow got a little bit of a ring in it. There we go. I want more of like a fat, round snare drum sound. Now what we'll do is we'll blend that with the original. I'm just going to tuck the drum leveler plugin way down here underneath the other snare drum. And hang on, let's make sure. Oh, we got a little phase issue here. It's my fault. I must have accidentally dragged it over. There we go. Actually, they should be in alignment now. I'm going to make the recovery and hold times a little lower on this one. And remember, there's also a bottom snare track as well that we're blending this with. All right, so let's see what the whole drum kit sounds like now. So you got a lot more punch there, and I dialed down the compression on the drum leveler plugin just so it wasn't so, I don't know, it was just seemed too level for me. It just starts to sound robotic that way. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna work with these toms, and we're gonna cut some of the bleed out, and then also bring up the poppiness of the toms. I'm not really a fan. Some people like to completely edit out everything in between the tom hits. For me, it really depends on the genre. If this is like a heavy metal tune, I might do that. But for like this something like this, I kind of want I want the tone of the tom mics, even if the toms aren't being used, to sort of add to the overall tone of the kit. So I don't want to completely gate the tom hits. I just want to sort of compress them up, and give them a little bit more punch. And at the same time, maybe pull the bleed back a little bit, but not too much. So let's start with the first tom here. And I actually like how the snare drum is getting picked up in it, and the snare drum is actually being compressed a little bit from the tom mic. It actually has kind of like a warming effect, especially when our original snare tracks get sort of like a twang to it. Yeah, so I'm basically letting the tom and the snare drum through and nothing else. Let's just copy over that drum leveler setting to the tom 2. And I think tom 2 is only really used like once in this entire passage. Yeah, right here. I think the problem with tom 2 is the way it's placed. It's very close to the ride cymbal, and I don't really want the ride in there. Yeah, you can hear it right there. So this may be a situation where maybe just for this one track, we want to cut out the parts of the ride cymbal are at. Because again, like I said, on this kit, I believe that tom 2 is right next to the ride cymbal, and it's not really helping us. Let me just compress it a little harder. Yeah, ride cymbal comes back. So you know what? For tom 2, we're just going to do this. We are going to completely cut that one out. I don't think we'll have to do it with tom 3, though. Let's try this on tom 3. Go back to the beginning just for a second. So again, just like the first time, it's picking up some of the snare in there. So let's see what all that sounds like. We cut the second tom out, but we're keeping tom 1 and tom 3 in. And they are panned sort of left and right, so they should kind of sort of balance each other out. Cool. So our recordings get a lot more punch to it. Now, I will warn you, one little thing that I've noticed about Drum Leveler is that when you use it too much, or you have too many instances of it, or you've just got a lot of plugins going on in your mix, or maybe you don't have a really fast processor that can keep up with it. I've noticed that Drum Leveler does, in some instances, cause some latency issues where your tracks with Drum Leveler on them are going to be a few or maybe even up to 20 milliseconds behind everything else in your mix, which is obviously a problem. So what I've done in the past with Drum Leveler is once I get the Drum Leveler setting I like, I generally will render it in place. I'll either use the bounce in place function in Logic, which is Control B, or if I'm in Pro Tools, I'll just bust the audio track down to a new audio track and just sort of print it in place. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed going over a new plugin. I'd like to do a lot more videos like this, where I maybe just go over some different plugins and some different tools that I like to use. I know for me personally, Drum Leveler has really, really changed the way I mix drums. And I'll even use Drum Leveler and then also maybe tuck in a drum sample with drum sample replacement. And it really gives me like this really punchy drum sound that I really like. Another thing I'd like to bring back up is the Patreon campaign. If you'd like to support this channel with a monthly donation, go over to patreon.com/MusicTechHelpGuy. We're trying to get some in-studio video tutorials that are quite expensive to produce because I have to pay the studio, pay the videographer, pay an audio technician on the side as well. So it's not cheap to do these things. So we're trying to raise $1,000 a month on Patreon. So again, that's patreon.com/MusicTechHelpGuy. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.